Now, how do you look at the transactional sale versus a complex sale? Uh, Have you
I
done
started
both?
off, I have done both. Yeah, I started off in transactional. So going back to the Cutco days, I'm sure you hear about Cutco sometimes. So first job out of high school, I think it was the summer after I graduated, I saw some random newspaper ad. It looked kind of mysterious and sounded like you could make good money. Then I went to this group interview and it was super awkward, but it was ended up being Cutco. And for whatever reason, I kind of made it through that interview process, and then I harassed all my football and wrestling buddies' parents for Cutco knives all summer. So a lot of pity sales, but that was definitely a transactional sale. And then right out of school, which is actually smart from this company that I work for, they would put you in a retail store, Home Depot, and you would sell B2C like with contractors and try to sell power tools directly to the end user. So you learn a lot about the contractors and also the brands at the ground level. So I think it's a good place to start in transactional, but then if you want to make more money and progress, you certainly need to get into complex sales. But I do think it's a good place to start on the transactional side.
Yeah, I think you learn some good skills, but I think the complex sale is just the opposite of it. And some of those transactional skills and mindsets make it hard to transition to complex sales and vice versa, because you can't sell Cutco like a complex sale.
They're pretty expensive, but no, I can't. Yeah.
It's just not economically viable to have 5 meetings to sell what $1,000 of knives. It doesn't make. And people are
Yeah.
like, "Are you moving in, Dustin, or are you just here to sell knives?" Right? It just doesn't make sense. And the same is true on the complex sale, because I see it all the time. Everyone's trying to treat their complex sale like a transactional sale. Discovery call, and it's all these goofballs who are trying. I see on LinkedIn who are like, "Oh, what are you talking about mindset, Brian? It's all about, action, and you know, pushing people through this process." It's like, maybe if they're inbound, you're right. But on the outbound, it's just the opposite. If they already know what they want, anyone can sell that. That's not selling, that's order taking. But when you're going out, do they even know what you do? Like, everyone knows what a knife does, right? It's probably the second most primitive device next to a fork. So you didn't have to explain what a knife did. You had to explain why it's different and the value of it and the status of it, and feed to the ego a little bit. On the complex sale, a lot of people aren't in market at the time, don't understand it. They've learned to live with the problem. So you've got latent versus active pain. And Cutco, did anybody really have active pain? You know what? I don't have a knife. Dustin, please, quickly, knife, knife. I need a knife. No, everyone has a knife, but they don't have, a beautiful knife or a knife set. And they're all chefs and cooks, and they need good knives, right?
Hmm.
On the complex sale, what I see is everyone's trying to speed up the sale. And it's like, well, first of all, is there a sale there? And is speeding it up the problem? Or is there no interest? And how many people are involved? Selling the knives is what, max two? Unless the kid
Hmm.
comes in and goes, "We don't need expensive knives. We need a good vacation." No one says that. You probably had the person who cooks going, "Yeah, yeah, knives." And then the person who's paying for this going, "How much? And what does it do differently?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're spot on. You're spot on. Yeah, you don't want to take. That's the problem is everyone's acting transactional in a complex world. So that Glengarry or whatever always be closing. It's very salesy, pressure, dog and pony demos. I was cutting the penny with scissors, discounts and pricing, all these gimmicks. But then people are taking that type of stuff and then trying to do it for complex, which is completely backwards. So it was a good place to learn because it's very uncomfortable. I guess I would say it's very uncomfortable to do those type of things, especially right out of high school. But if you do that in complex, you're going to get eaten alive, and that's what's probably ruined a lot of sales is because you get so much people pitching you out of the gates and trying to speed things up and discount pricing, gimmicks, giveaways that doesn't work when you're selling something that's complex, that's 6 figures, 7 figures, and there's a whole kind of process behind it.
Right. Because in the Cutco thing, they're the budget owners. They're the decision makers. At most, you're going to let us think about it. We need to talk amongst ourselves. Okay, so then it might be a two-call sale because they might say, "Oh, we're still a maybe," which is a no. In the complex thing, it's just the opposite. The more you talk about you and your product, the less likely you are to sell. The more you talk about them, what they're doing, why they're there, what they're trying to accomplish, how they're doing it now, increases the likelihood of you selling. You knowing how to get the next meeting is just as important as you knowing what the product does and how it's different. And the complex sale, there's no one user and decision maker. Very rarely. There's lots of people who are using the product, get benefits out of the product, and then there's a lot of people who get side benefits out of it. Some people who get hurt by it. It intrudes on their territory, their job, their livelihood, their power within the company. And then to get money, have to go through all these other people that may not even understand what it does and why you want it. That's why they call it complex. And everybody goes, "Well, who's the decision maker? Let me talk to them." They get into the Cutco model and they're like, "Well, I don't use a knife. My friends don't care what kind of knives I have. And why would I buy this again? Oh, because Joe wants it. But why? Where's Joe? Why isn't he telling me why he wants it, why he needs it, what do we get from it?" Well, they're really sharp. Features, benefits. And all of a sudden it doesn't work. And that's why it's really a thinking person's game versus, that grinder, robotic type door to door. And I think a
No,
lot of, especially sales managers, they love it when it's warm inbound. They know what to do there. They don't know what to do with cold outbound. This is just the opposite.
yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it takes most of the complex is going to be multiple months, most likely, probably 6, 12 months, maybe even years, depending on what you're doing. There's a lot of risks involved for the company, potentially, of what decision they're making. There's a lot of people involved from all these different business units, and you kind of have to navigate that process with the customer. And there's a lot more issues that can come up. There's a lot more mistakes that you can make, and if you don't treat it like that and you treat it more transactional, it's going to eat you up, and you're not going to have a ton of success unless if you're working at a big company that has an inbound that has a ton of momentum, which that doesn't happen super often anyway. But yeah, it's I think I'm built for the complex sale because I like kind of the challenge of it. I like the longer term, more relationship building where you're kind of, building a lot of rapport and trying to make them look good. I always try to make the customer look good because I do think they have to stick their neck out for you depending on what you're selling. And if you can make them look good and kind of guide them through that process and make it easy on them, you kind of become one of them. I mean, I was at an event this week, and you at a certain point you almost feel like you're working for that company sometimes because you put so much time and effort in there, and you're at their facility on these calls. So yeah, I'm definitely built for the complex sale, but there's a lot of people that are probably not helping the cause and making salespeople look like the classic things you see on the movies and whatnot.
Yeah, a lot of people are just trying to, force it through. And if it doesn't go through, they're blaming the customer. Oh, they're not a good match. They're not ready, whatever. And I think 99% of the sales content out there is really transactionally focused. What's your elevator pitch? What's your value proposition? Mutual action plan. It's like, come on. They're not, we got to understand that the client doesn't know how to buy. In a transaction, everyone knows how to buy a knife, right? They give you a credit card. How do you buy a house, though? Can't give a credit card. You got to get a mortgage. You got to get inspected. That's much more of a complex sale, higher dollar amount, a lot of complexity to it. It's not. And then, okay, how do you buy something where it's not your money? You got to convert the people inside the company to spend money on something that benefits you. And this is why the relationship is so important, because there has to be this broad bandwidth of communication between you and the people within the company to understand what they're facing and going up against, and for them to trust and believe you about how to get it done. Because in a lot of cases, they've never gotten the company to spend this type of money before. And they think it's, well, I need it. I work here. They're supposed to provide me with the things I need. And I can't tell you the number of people who just take my quote and send it to procurement and think something's going to happen. And a lot of procurement people don't even reply back. They just ignore it and delete it. They have no clue how a company does it from an administrative and political process. And when I learned that, all of a sudden my game just changed, because I was thinking much more transactionally. The product does what you want. It makes economic sense. Let's rock and roll. But nobody bought.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I doing the same thing early in my career. I was lucky that I was with a big company that had a good brand, so I could get away with more things such as that. But I would just be following up multiple times, just pounding people. And sometimes it would work, but I don't, looking back, I didn't really feel good about doing that. I was just doing it to get something done. And I'm sure the people were annoyed with me. And it's probably not as accepted anymore compared to what it used to be. But the whole follow up and checking in and just pounding people 15 times, eventually it may work, but I don't think it works very often anymore. I think people are just fed up with that. And you don't feel good about it as a salesperson. I'd much rather be what you're talking about, where you're kind of guiding them through that. You're helping them make the decision. You're checking all the boxes on the business side and then on the product side. And I think you just have to look at it that way, as kind of you're part of their team and you're helping them make this decision and making them look good is how I always see it.
Yeah, because they're not delaying the purchase because they forgot. They're delaying the purchase because it didn't progress and they don't know what to do next. So yes, more pressure on them may help them figure that out. But here's a smarter thing. Teach them what to do. Show them how to fill out a purchase request. Show them who has to approve it. Let's get a conversation started with them. Give the management what they need to see to approve it. Instead of just pushing, what you're essentially doing is telling your kid to try calculus harder. Just keep writing an answer down and seeing if the teacher says that's the right answer. That's basically what you're doing. And okay, by random chance, they might pick the right answer for the calculus equation, but that's no way to live. How about if you teach them how the calculus works? And if you don't know, how about you learn, because that's your job? And yes, your company won't teach you, but you can do that on your own, because they're all set up for that warm inbound. They come in, beauty contest, we do a little eval, they're going to buy one or either us or our competitors. That's a lot easier. Now try cold outbound, where they don't know what it does. You get one person there who loves it. They try it, they love it. They tell their manager, I love it, I need it. And the manager goes, okay, get a quote. Manager sits on it, doesn't know why he's doing it, other than Joe loves it. Where is Joe's affection for a product on the manager's list of things to cover? It might be tops. Most likely isn't. But what if the manager understood how it impacts the team, the group, the company, and then can articulate that up the chain? That's what needs to happen. And you're not going to read that in a book, because the people who have done it have no motivation to document it. The people who write books just read other people's books and rewrite it in a more, scientifically proven way or data driven or research based so that you buy it. It's like when Challenger came out, everybody was like, oh, what you have to do is give them an insight. Okay. Did anyone ever run from that insight down to procurement and say, I need this? That's not selling, that's creating interest. Selling is the whole thing. Until you get the order, that's all selling. And we think since we know how to do our part, they know how to do their part.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think everyone is kind of acting like a robot, and it's probably because that's how they're being taught from their company. There's a robot going through the motions, going through Challenger, spin, whatever it is, and just going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, and just pitch slapping people on LinkedIn, and they're not really taking a step back to actually think about what's going on with that customer or this complex sale. I mean, a lot of these industries, I know healthcare is unbelievably complicated. Government, I think you did some government stuff, really complicated. Tech, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, massive Fortune 500 companies. I mean, you have to really think a lot and try to map out what you're doing with the process. And instead, people are just going through the script and just boom, 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 and it's a numbers game or whatever. But how do you actually kind of take a step back and think as a salesperson? And I don't think many people are doing that. And then some industries are more challenging than others. I was going to ask you what do you think are the most complex industries to sell in? I think healthcare is up there. I think government, and then probably when you get in those big tech enterprise deals, have to be up there too.
Well, what makes a sale complex is dollar amount, number of people involved. On the industry side, well, you got a hospital, a lot of people. Costs a lot. And how well is that customer doing economically? And, because like in the government, there's no profit motive. Everyone's on retirement, not retirement, but they have retirement plans. They're going to be at that agency for 30 years. But they've also got subcontractors who make most of the decisions and do most of the work. But they have their own motivation. They want to make their customer happy, do it at a reasonable cost, and they want to be able to have a life themselves. They don't want to have to work weekends and nights to get this done. So and with the government, you've got purchasing regulations. So they just can't buy anything they want from anyone they want. They have to justify it and typically buy off of contracts that are already established with terms and conditions. So the bigger the organization you sell to, the more likely the complexity is very high. But they're the ones with the money. I mean, the things that I was able to do during wartime, after 9/11, it was blank check. It went from, a sales cycle of 18 months to 18 days.
Crazy.
And all of a sudden, procurement was moved from the main buildings out into campers in the parking lot. And I never saw them work so hard. And there'd be sales reps lined out upside the campers, waiting to talk to procurement to get things done. You can't do that in a company. I mean, they called up Sun Microsystems at the time and said, do not deliver one computer to one other customer until you fulfill all our requirements. No, that's a nice problem to have.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But, if a war wasn't going on, it would be 18 months of, rationalizing, justifying, keeping momentum, finding another way to have yet another meeting with another division manager and trying to push this up on the priority list. Now, a lot of people don't understand these differences and they don't care. They're just like, whoever buys next. And it's like sending a proposal and then following up is not selling. That's like order taking in reverse. You're calling up to take the order instead of receiving the call to take the order. You're not helping. It doesn't, oh, I forgot. Sorry. Oh, you're right. I forgot to do this. That can be true, but that's probably not the problem.
Yeah, and then that makes sense what you're saying about the industries. And it also takes a lot of time if you're working in healthcare, government, whatever it is, or that Fortune 500 company. It takes a lot of time to understand their process too. So it doesn't just happen overnight. That can take years to kind of get in with those type of industries and really know what you're doing from how those deals kind of cycle. So that's not easy either. What do you think people can learn to do the complex, or do you think they just get taught so poorly now with the way
Oh,
managers do stuff, or do you think it just depends where they came from or what industry? Because I know a lot of times I see people in food services, whether it be waiters or bartenders, or they tend to be good salespeople. They have good work ethic, and then they can transition if they get taught the right way. So, do you think it's possible? Or is there certain people that do better than others going from transactional to complex?
yeah. I mean, I think you can, but you have to have the right mindset. You have to have the kind of project manager, detective, puzzle solver mindset as opposed to grinder mindset. Interesting story. One early stage startup I was at that was hyper complex. We were selling like an object database, but we weren't competing against relational database. We were competing against, hand built file databases. So, there was a little bit of inbound, not much, but the new CEO brought in this guy who was from 100% transactional sale, parametric technology. He was a grinder, and PTC is the classic grinder company. They're the idiots that came up with MedPick, these sales operations views of selling. And they were like the gorilla in that space. They had the best product. It was pretty much meeting, demo, propose, negotiate, close. And he wanted us to do that. And I go, we don't have any of that. And he goes, well, you're just not looking for it. I go, believe me, I'm looking for the easy sale. And he goes, you're making things too complex. And I'm like, top rep 2 years in a row, you've sold nothing. You might want to listen to me. He didn't want to listen to me.
How'd that work out?
He lasted 6 months.
There you go.
Yeah. But first quarter, he started off the kickoff meeting. He goes, this will never happen. We missed the number. Company missed the number because he wanted to triple the size of the sales force. So everybody was recruiting the whole quarter. Second quarter, same problem. The third quarter, they let him go. And he ended up doing well, but he went to another place that was transactional. In the tornado, inbound, already established value, leader. It worked. It wasn't that he was a bad sales leader. His equation, his process just did not match the market. And mine did because I wanted to make money. And I didn't have any inbound. I'd have like 5 deals a quarter, small, medium, and large. And they were hyper complex because they already had something that worked, but it was costing 10 times what it would cost to use us. It didn't scale. They had to maintain it. Any change they had to deal with it didn't have distribution, multi-users, all of these things that they wanted. But I had to communicate that up the org. And a lot of people were trying to treat it like a demo, propose, negotiate, close.
Yeah, it's much different when you don't have inbound coming in and you have to really figure out that process and go through all those different stages. So it never every company always teaches that same like demo proposal flows, but it never works out that way. Even if it is somewhat inbound, sometimes it still never works out that way either. So
Yeah.
it's funny how that tends to come up like any organization when they do their sales training. And it's most likely people teaching it that haven't been enough 10 years, never around, and someone a few years out is entertaining with that.
Well, yeah, it does work typically if you're the market leader,
Yeah.
right? It's like, look at like Salesforce. People don't buy it because it's the best CRM. People buy it because everyone else bought it.
Yeah.
So is a sales leader going to buck the wave and say, oh, well, this one or that one is more, or we'll use three. We'll use one for prospecting, one for sales, and one for customer success. The CEO is going to, why don't we just use Salesforce? Okay, we'll do that. That's when it works.
Well, when you find another era when Salesforce is taking over CRM or AWS is taking over the market, let me know so I can go
Well,
hop on and find that. But it's not, it doesn't
well
happen very often. Yeah.
let me tell you about that. Jeff Barr, who's like the chief evangelist at AWS, he used to be my CTO at a company.
Oh, wow.
And I remember when he went to Amazon before AWS, probably 20 years ago. And the architect of AWS was the architect of the company I worked for. He went over there. And I'm like, it's a website, it's an e-commerce site. What are you guys going to do there? And they're like, oh, Brian, you don't get it. I thought they were idiots.
Well,
And they
sorry
go,
to bring that one up then.
well, because at the time they saw something I didn't see. I saw a book site on the internet. They saw, hey, if they could do this, they could come up with their own infrastructure and sell their infrastructure. Now, if I listened to them, I'd be at AWS right now. But see, they saw something I didn't. I should have followed them. And I remember when Salesforce came out, you know why they won? Everyone thinks they won because it was a better product. They won because they didn't have to convince IT of anything. The sales leader could just put it on their credit card and expense it. And it circumvented that whole, it reduced the complexity because now you didn't have to get IT and security involved. But you did have
Smart.
to explain to the CEO why the customer data is in someone else's database.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are two great examples. And they also had an amazing brand that they built behind it, which kind of fuels the fire too. So yeah, easier said than done to find that. But yeah, when you know the next one coming up, let me know.